Have you ever heard of a religious group that runs its own printing press, construction companies, and faces serious accusations of child labor violations? Buckle up, because we're diving into the world of the 12 tribes. Beneath the surface of their so-called Christian beliefs lies a web of controversy, accusations of child abuse, unpaid labor, and even justifications for slavery through their religious texts. The 12 tribes claim they're just misunderstood and are simply following their faith. So what's the truth? Are they a misunderstood religious group or something more sinister? Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. In 1937, Elbert Eugene, or Gene, Spriggs Jr., was born into a devout Methodist family in East Ridge, Tennessee. His early adult life was seemingly unsettled in a number of ways, as he held a succession of jobs, was married 3 times before turning 35, and at least according to him, also experienced some spiritual uneasiness. In 1970, Gene says he had a life-changing experience when he confessed his sins and dedicated his life to Jesus Christ at age 33. In 1972, Gene married Marcia Ann Duval, and the couple moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. Shortly after their marriage, the two started a ministry for teenagers called the Light Brigade. The ministry operated out of a little coffee shop in their own home, the Lighthouse. Things seemed pretty chill and groovy, as things often do at coffee shops, especially in the 1970s, at least for a while. By 1974, between 50 and 60 people were actually living with the Spriggs. They purchased 3 houses and opened their first Yellow Deli restaurant. The Light Brigade started hopping around to different churches, bringing people from all sorts of backgrounds with them. This wasn't exactly the norm back then, and it caused some serious friction. Finally, they decided to try out the First Presbyterian Church, but guess what? Even that didn't work out. They protested the canceling of a Sunday worship service on Super Bowl Sunday, and as a result, they began holding their own services in a local park. They began to call themselves the Vine Christian Community Church, and even started planting more churches with their signature yellow delis in other towns. But things were about to take a turn. As they distanced themselves from mainstream religion, the criticism started rolling in. It wasn't too long before cult articles began appearing in the local media. Folks opposed Gene performing baptisms. 2 local colleges placed the Yellow Deli as off limits, and deprogrammer Ted Patrick organized abduction deprogrammings of members. According to Mia Donovan, who created a documentary about deprogrammer Ted, quote, "He kidnapped a girl from the 12 tribes while she was wearing a wedding dress to get married. The 12 tribes would marry people within the group quite young. The family hired Ted to get the girl out of the group the day she was married, and he did. He kidnapped her and deprogrammed her," end quote. To get some of that heat off of them, and probably to keep Ted away from their young girls, the 12 tribes moved to Island Pond, Vermont in 1979. This gave rise to a more tight-knit, close, communal living arrangement for the members. The move wasn't easy. Money was tight, and some members couldn't handle the pressure. The group attracted the attention of another group called the Citizens Freedom Foundation, who'd already accused them of mind control back in Chattanooga. This time, though, they upped the ante. Child abuse. Yikes. In 1984, things escalated. On June 22nd, 1984, 90 Vermont state troopers and 50 social rehabilitation services workers, fueled by the accusations of child abuse, surprise raided the 12 tribes community at dawn. They searched homes and seized 112 children. Talk about a nightmare. Many parents outright refused to cooperate, going so far as to ignore requests to identify their own children. The plan was to examine the kids for signs of abuse, but that plan fell apart when a judge determined the raid was unconstitutional. The search warrant evidently was too general and not supported by concrete evidence of abuse. The charges against the 12 tribes fell apart, and the children were returned to the community within hours. Even today, the 12 tribes view the raid as a test of their faith and celebrate June 22nd as a day of deliverance when their children were returned to them and God protected the group from the overreach of the government. They still hold ceremonies to commemorate this day. By 1989, the community had earned some acceptance in Island Pond. They even started growing internationally, opening branches in countries like Canada, Brazil, and the UK. During this expansion, they formally adopted the name the 12 Tribes we know today. Throughout the past several decades, the 12 tribes have refined their beliefs. Their big goal? To rebuild the church exactly how it was in the first century, as described in the book of Acts. They're not just talking about Sunday service and hymns, though. They believe this means recreating the entire social structure of a bygone era, with 12 tribes living in specific locations, a modern-day New Israel, if you will. They believe that when each of those 12 tribes reaches a minimum of 1,200 believers, Jesus Christ will return. The movement receives ongoing revelations about the end time through individuals with apostolic gifts. In case you were wondering, which I definitely was, apostolic gifts refers to spiritual gifts or abilities believed to be bestowed upon individuals by the Holy Spirit, similar to those attributed to the apostles in the New Testament. These gifts can include prophecy, healing, speaking in tongues, and other abilities that are seen as necessary for the guidance and leadership of the church. So I guess these folks in the 12 tribes are getting that prophecy itch scratched, so to speak. Anyway, according to the 12 Tribes' own website, quote, "The 12 Tribes is an emerging spiritual nation. We are a confederation of 12 self-governing tribes made up of self-governing communities. By community, we mean families and single people who live together in homes and on farms. We are disciples of the Son of God, whom we call by his Hebrew name, Yahshua. We follow the Old and New Testament scriptures and live like the early disciples in Acts chapters 2 and 4. With all of our hearts, we want to do our Father's will, which is to love one another and be a light to the nations, so that they could see our life of love and know how much their Creator loves them," end quote. Sounds nice. Anyway. The 12 Tribes teaches that there are absolute values known as natural law, which all humans recognize as inherently true and right. However, they believe that simply adhering to natural law will not be enough to bring about the return of the Messiah. The movement emphasizes the need for separation from contemporary society, as they feel that the values of natural law are being lost. They are critical of the rise of a multicultural global social order, which they believe undermines traditional values and promotes materialism, feminism, and other societal terrible things, I guess. Whatever. To prepare for the millennium, the 12 Tribes aims to grow their 12 tribes to 1,200 members each, totaling 144,000 faithful who will be included in God's millennial kingdom. They expect this preparatory period to last up to 7 generations. Members anticipate an increasingly hostile world dominated by a world government, during which they will continue to spiritually purify themselves. They expect to be forced into the wilderness before the end time. The 12 tribes really try to distance themselves and separate themselves from government, although they do seek out men of conscience as allies when conflicts arise. They believe that they will play a key role in the end time, with 4 phases unfolding according to the book of Revelation. The first phase involves the spiritual restoration of the 12 tribes of Israel through the creation of their communes. The second phase will see the return of Yahshua, who will reclaim the earth. The third phase involves the building of the stone kingdom with a total separation of religion and state. The fourth phase mirrors the Battle of Armageddon, with the army of Yahshua defeating the army of the evil one. The group believes there are 3 eternal destinies. After the fall of man, every person is given a conscience, and that after dying, every person goes to a state of being called death, regardless of faith. Believers will reign with Yahshua for 1,000 years before the final judgment, where non-believers will be divided into the righteous and the unrighteous. The unrighteous will be sent to the lake of fire, while the righteous will go to heaven with the 12 tribes. Sounds nice, I guess, sort of. Anyway, that's a lot about what will happen in the future, but what about what the religious group, cult, does right now? Well, delis. According to the group, quote, "There needed to be a place for people to get a break and sit down and think about the deep things of life. So they decided to make a nice, comfortable place with good food and maybe a chance to touch hearts with those passing through the doors. It could be a friendly spot to meet their neighbors," end quote. The group has opened 30-plus yellow deli locations around the world, including in Brazil, Argentina, Japan, Australia, Canada, the UK, Spain, and of course, a lot of them in the United States. They often open them near college campuses, including one in one of my favorite college towns, Boulder, Colorado. And in honor of that very thin connection for this week, we're making a Colorado drink. Okay, so weirdly, the last time I made this drink, the Saskatchewan Paralyzer, if you remember, I didn't know was basically the same as this drink. Well, we were talking about a cult, and we're talking about a cult today. Maybe this particular drink just screams cult. I don't know. There are two very different origin stories of the Colorado Bulldog. One is that it originated in Russia during the 19th or 20th centuries. The other is quite a bit later, saying it emerged in the late 1990s in Colorado. Judging by the fact that it is also claimed to have originated, albeit under a different name, in Canada, it's probably safe to say that lots of versions of this drink have been crafted in lots of places over the last 200 years. Even today's drink is going to use cream instead of milk, which was used in the Saskatchewan Paralyzer. They are all variations on a theme. In a cocktail shaker, add 1 part coffee liqueur, 1 part vodka, and 1 part cream. Shake to combine and chill, and then strain into a glass with fresh ice. Add 1 part cola slowly so that it doesn't overflow the glass. For the mocktail version, add 1 part coffee, 1 part non-alcoholic vodka, half a part simple syrup, and 1 part cream to a shaker with ice. Shake and strain over fresh ice, and again, add 1 part cola slowly so that it doesn't overflow the glass. Drink up and toast the fact that you're not in a cult, right? New recruits to the 12 tribes are required to renounce their names and belongings, live in one of the 36 global communities run by the group, and adhere to the rigid rules of the group, which include, according to ex-members, guidelines on everything from the proper amount of toilet paper to use, 2 sheets, to the shape of one's glasses, round. Driving on Saturdays is forbidden, and Irish music and chocolate are banned. Women must part their hair in the middle. Men must roll up their pant legs. Women can only wear dresses on weekends. It is recommended / damn near required for followers to sever all ties to the outer world. The 12 tribes utilizes 3 random vehicles to evangelize at various events. The first is the Peacemaker Marine, which is an A-class barquentine, I think, sailing ship bought and restored by the group. A ship. It sails along the eastern part of the United States, giving tours and evangelizing at ports. Y'all, this boat is it's huge. It's a huge sailing ship. And why? I don't know. The other 2 vehicles are the Peacemaker 1 and 2 buses. If you're watching on YouTube, you can just see how groovy these cult members are trying to be with their evangelizing. They've got to get to 144,000 members somehow, right? Boats, buses, and delis? Not only do the 12 tribes operate the 30 yellow delis, but they also run a printing company that you can get things printed from, or you can also pick up some of their literature that they also print there. They own BOJ Construction, a general contractor based in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and operating nationally. Reports of unpaid and even child labor within these businesses are deeply concerning, and there's a lot of them. An ex-member from Boulder who left the 12 tribes in 2016 says he worked in a factory beginning when he was 13 years old. His days started at 6 a.m. with a required gathering, and then he'd work in a 12 tribes-owned factory until 5 p.m. He'd go in the evening, gathering again at 6 p.m., and then go back to work from about 7:30 p.m. until 11 at night. The 12 tribes call this child labor apprenticeships. According to that ex-member, quote, "What they call apprenticeships is just working in the industry. We stopped school at 12 or 13, and that's pretty much everybody," end quote. And even if they're adults, it doesn't mean they aren't abused, at least financially. All those fancy yellow delis with their hippie logos and their desire to bring the community together, well, none of those employees are paid. They're all considered volunteers. And that, at least according to Scott Moss, director of the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics in the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, is illegal. He says, quote, "If you're volunteering at a church's soup kitchen, that is volunteering. If you're volunteering at a church's pizzeria that is open to the public and competes with other pizzerias down the street and is doing what other pizzerias do, then that is work," end quote. And even if you don't volunteer work for the Yellow Deli, you're going to need to send all of your money that you do make to the tribes. Former member Jason Wolf remembered earning $350,000 on a construction project in the early 2000s and being ordered to send it to 12 tribes members in Florida for a project to benefit the tribes. Woof. And now for the even worse stuff. I don't know, content warning. The 12 tribes believe that Black people are cursed to be slaves. The tribes teaches that any poverty, unrest, or problems affecting Black people today are because Black people are not subservient to white people and are living against God's natural order. Only by joining the 12 tribes, of course, can Black people be freed from the curse, the cult asserts in its teaching. Jean himself has preached, quote, "It is horrible that someone would rise up to abolish slavery. What a marvelous opportunity that Blacks could be brought over here to be slaves so that they could be found worthy of the nations," end quote. What? Not to outdo themselves, the group also teaches that Jews are collectively responsible for the death of Christ. They seem fun to have around at parties. While all members of the 12 tribes must conform to the rules, women, of course, are often abused in the highly patriarchal society and are seen as property. Women are known to be actively abused by their husbands in front of their children, and it's not only overlooked, it's openly accepted because the father, as the man of the house, can do whatever he needs to do to ensure the woman is subservient. Another ex-member said, quote, "They believe women's rightful place is in absolute submission to men. The girls raised there have been raised from birth to believe this. They have no self-worth. They have no value except in reference to men," end quote. Nice. Divorce is forbidden, as is gay marriage. According to some of their own literature, being gay is a sin worthy of being put to death. Children and teens believed to be gay are subjected to interrogation and severe punishment. But you don't need to be gay to be severely punished as a child in the 12 tribes. In the 12 tribes, an adult may grab a toddler who's having a tantrum, hold her tightly on his lap, possibly by putting his knee over hers, restrict both of her arms, and cover her mouth with his palm until the child stops resisting. For an hour, the toddler could wail, scream, and struggle. According to previous members, she won't be let free until she gives herself up. The intention is to break her will. The 12 tribes' emphasis on discipline includes corporal punishment for children with a reed-like rod to enforce a clean conscience. While they maintain it's used for moral correction, former members paint a disturbing picture of harsh beatings and daily punishments. Even for the smallest perceived transgressions, ex-members who were raised in the 12 tribes recounted receiving spankings on their bare bottoms, hands, and the soles of their feet. It was usual for parents to spank their children 20 or 30 times a day. An ex-member would say, quote, "We were basically beaten down into absolutely nothing so that they could build you up into what they wanted you to be. Asking for seconds at breakfast could get you a spanking," end quote. Another ex-member remembered a practice called scourging, in which a child was stripped naked and beaten with a rod from head to toe. Food was often withheld from children as another form of punishment. Oof. And I'm not going to go into any more details about this one because this is feeling a little too heavy already for the new and improved capers and cocktails. But also know that former members stated that although the 12 tribes does not support or condone sexual abuse in children, it does occur and is seldom reported to the authorities when it is found. Basically, the 12 tribes suck. For what it's worth, which is nothing, the 12 tribes says none of this is true, from the child labor to the child abuse. They maintain their innocence and claim they're simply misunderstood. They actively engage with the media and authorities to clear their name and defend their right to practice their faith. A current member, Tim Pendergrass, says, quote, "Really, all we are about really, honestly, is loving people, loving our Creator, loving our children, and that's really it. All we know is if we love one another and we try to love everybody, it's all going to work out. That might be kind of simplistic, but it sure does help me live a stress-free life and have lots of peace and be willing to do anything for love. That's what I like," end quote. Jeez. But an anonymous ex-member would say, quote, "They have no problem with lying because everyone out here in the non-tribes world doesn't need to know the truth. Whatever they need to say to keep on doing what they do is what they're going to say," end quote. I think I'm going to go with the second quote on this one. Yeah. The founder of the 12 tribes, Elbert Eugene Spriggs Jr., died in 2021 while visiting his property in Hiddenite, North Carolina. Within the movement, Gene was called the Anointed One, and also his Hebrew name, Yonek. The 12 Tribes also made headlines in Colorado in January 2022 when officials announced that they were looking into the possibility that the group compound off El Dorado Springs Drive in Boulder County was the source of the deadly Marshall Fire, the most destructive wildfire in state history, burning over 1,000 homes. 6 days before the Marshall Fire, 12 Tribes started a fire of old fencing material, tree branches, and pallets, among other junk. It turns out it wasn't them, but it did thrust them into a national spotlight where a lot of the things that I talked about today were brought to light, including through a very large Denver Post expose that I will link articles from below in case you want to fall further into the terrible, terrible rabbit hole that is the 12 Tribes. That girl that Ted, the reprogrammer, kidnapped several decades ago in her wedding dress did make it out of the cult, but her twin sister did not. She is still in the 12 Tribes 40 years later with 11 children. Today, about 3,000 people are estimated to be members of the 12 Tribes, which maintains about 36 worldwide communities across 4 continents. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope that if you ever find yourself in Boulder, Colorado, you maybe go somewhere else for lunch than the Yellow Deli. I totally believe that everyone should live their life the way they want, but we also don't have to financially support any cults. There's plenty of delicious food in Boulder, and I'm sure a bar or two that will serve you a Colorado Bulldog. Join us on TikTok, where that and all of your other dreams can come true. We are at Capers and Cocktails, where the "and" is spelled out. You can find the link to that and all the links to my socials at www.keepersandcocktails.com, actually. You can also find an easy way to contact me if you want to collab or have an idea for a case. I'll see you next week, and remember, there are always alternatives to joining a cult. Yeah, that's the outro.